For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Chris Treviño for instant analysis of USC's Tuesday practice of Stanford week. The Trojans returned to Howard Jones Field in full pads. And Chris, I think the most notable thing to come out of practice today was the return of Gary Bryant. And I thought it was interesting when we talked to Clay Helton on the Sunday night press conference. He said, it's hopeful we'll get Gary Bryant back. And Gary had been out for a good bit in fall camp, but he came back with a statement.
Absolutely, yeah. I feel like Gary has been out since that first week of fall camp. We saw him on the sidelines, and we think, oh, that wasn't good. And now he's back, off those health and safety protocols, healthy from that hamstring that was bugging him. And, yeah, he had quite a practice. Did not do the full practice. Helton said they let him go about 70% of the way. But he was the eye catcher out of practice, number one, mainly in the one-on-ones. He was unbeatable, could not guard him. He had multiple touchdowns. I believe he had a stretch of plays where he just had touchdown after touchdown after touchdown, and it looked like he was trying to gobble up every rep that he could. Obviously, he had missed a lot of time. He said he was just happy to be back here with his brothers, happy to be catching the ball, happy to just running around. So you could tell he was out there bringing some energy, and that's a big boost for this wide receiver core that we've talked about multiple times over the last couple of days, that they need a established number 2 guy, someone that can step up and give them juice outside of Drake London, number 15. So having him back, it's a good sign that he looks like he's back in conditioning. Clay Helton said he's been doing the last 4 days, he's been doing conditioning stuff, and he said he was feeling fine. The hamstring's feeling fine. He feels like he's in game shape. A couple more days will prove that, but nice to have number 1 back out there, and he is excited to be back out on the field and hopefully bring some juice to this offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely a boost to the wide receiver room as well. Now, I got to talk to offensive line coach Clay McGuire today based on, this was the first time that his starters got to play against an opponent that wasn't in Cardinal and gold. And he said, well, we had some first game jitters. He said, especially off the tackles, they had a little bit of inexperience, and that showed. What do you have to say about just the overall performance?
Yeah, overall, he thought there were a lot of positives. Obviously, some things they can clean up, but the good news for him is that we are nowhere near our potential when it comes to the long term of this offensive line. Yes, he did say the edges, a little bit of trouble out there. They need to get better at the pass protection, but that's not really a surprising quote coming from the O-line coach, considering they were starting 2 first-time starters in redshirt freshmen in Jonah Monheim and Cortland Ford. But overall, he was pleased with what they did. Things they need to clean up. It's just, like I said, the pass pro on the edges. He thought the interior had a couple of bad calls, a couple of busts. But overall, he was very pleased. He said they played a good game, but it's specifically about the run game, he felt if they had done a perfect game, they could have had maybe 40 to 50 more yards and a couple of touchdowns, which would have made a big difference. That would have put USC over 200 yards on the ground and obviously some more offensive output on the scoreboard. So, he liked what he saw, things they can improve on and grow from. So it was a good first game in his mind.
Mm-hmm. I feel like it was a mixed bag for him. He was like, I don't want to call it sloppy, but it wasn't as sharp as it could be. So I think he knows that improvement will come as the season progresses. But I thought it was interesting, too. I asked him, we knew that Cortland Ford dislocated his finger during the game, and we saw some mixing and matching. And I said, how much of that was due to the Cortland Ford dislocation or because you planned that going into the game? He said, no, I planned to rotate. And he said, I actually meant to rotate more. He wanted to get more reps for Jalen McKenzie at tackle, but he didn't, and he said he wants to do that going forward. So he said that's something that we'll keep seeing this season, and he essentially said Justin Dedich could be considered a starter based on how valuable he is to this offensive line.
Yeah, McGuire kind of highlighted DD, as I like to call him, in the fall camp, saying, he's one of our probably most valuable offensive linemen. He was the most physical guy coming out of spring camp, and they wanted to get him on the field, and he rotated in at both of those guard spots. It's a unique thing to have a rotation on the offensive line. I believe my quote was, it is not the wide receivers, it's the offensive line.
Yes.
That doesn't make any sense, but what I'm trying to say is that you don't usually see that on the offensive line. Usually you want to keep those same 5 starters in there, keep the cohesion, keep the chemistry. But you see McGuire, you're thinking he has, a really good player, and Justin Dedich that he wants to get on the field, wants to see him out there, and he thinks they can help them on the interior offensive line. And then Jalen McKenzie wants to keep him fresh, keep him out there. He is a one-time starter who's now in that 6-man swing tackle kind of role. Yeah. So it's nice to keep him involved. And he said, he's the guy I think that can help us down the line. So, it's an interesting strategy, and I kind of like it, just getting those guys more reps and getting them prepared if something happens within this offensive line.
Mm-hmm. We've talked a lot about USC's defensive line depth just because there's been some weird movements on the roster there, and there's been more movements as far as injuries go. As far as Nick Figueroa, he did not practice today. He did come out with ice on his shoulder, did some rehabbing. Clay Helton said on Saturday that he has an AC sprain. But then we saw Jake Lichtenstein go down during practice. He did leave early, and I believe that was for an x-ray, but I asked Clay Helton about it, and he said that the x-ray came back negative, but they do believe it's an AC sprain for Lichtenstein as well. So, Chris, that defensive line depth is getting shakier each practice, I feel.
Yeah, Helton said they wanted to be proactive with Lichtenstein, pull him out early, but it was a scary sight for USC fans to see him in the trainer's tent getting checked out, no pads on, and then he rides off on a cart, especially with the hits that this line has already taken. It looks like it could be an issue moving forward. You hope you get at least one of those guys back, Figueroa or Jake Lichtenstein, to really help out against this physical Stanford team that you expect to see. But Lichtenstein was the guy who stepped up when Figueroa went down, and now the guy who stepped up is now possibly on the mend. So that's not a great sign. That's going to put a lot more pressure on a guy like Corey Foreman, the freshman, who they use more mainly in a third down scenario, but now he might be asked to do more first and second down stuff. That puts a little bit more versatility or pressure on a guy like Tuitu Pelotu. We've talked about the versatility of this defensive line. Mm-hmm. He's the guy who can go out, play end, move some guys around to take over his defensive tackle spot. So I think they'd be okay if he would have to play on the end. I don't think that'd be an issue. And, there might be a more opportunity for a guy like freshman Colin Mobley, a fellow PG County Beach boy. We saw him working a little bit more with the defensive line today, and, that's what happens. One guy goes down, someone has to step up. And, Dijon Benton, who's made plays in fall camp and spring camp, he could also be in line for more work. So someone's going to have to step up if both of those guys are out, your two most veteran guys. So that could be a problem moving forward, and that's something we're going to have to keep an eye on as the week moves forward.
Yeah, and definitely questions we'll have for Vic So'oto tomorrow during the defensive staff availability. But as far as other personnel moves, we didn't see Isaiah pull him out at practice today. I don't think we were anticipating that. And then Darwin Barlow got more work today, but it seems like he's still close to getting back. Clay Helton didn't want to say that he was fully healthy yet.
Yeah, he seemed to have a pretty active day. That's a guy they could really use, considering that we did not see two other running backs out there today. Keenan Christen was not out there. Clay Helton said, I believe he wasn't available for team activities today. And then Brandon Campbell, the freshman, who has usually been on scout team, noticeably he wasn't out there as well. He said he is sick. So that's something you're going to have to monitor moving forward. But he did get a lot of burn today just because he was the third back. And it does seem like he's progressing nicely. Obviously, they pulled him back on Saturday, even though he warmed up with the team. But if you can get him back, that's a big boost to the running back room, even though they seem dedicated to that 1A, 1B kind of situation. But getting healthy is never a bad thing, and he did seem to take a step forward today.
Mm-hmm. Other than that, Chris, it was a pretty straightforward practice. Any final thoughts before we wrap this one up?
Obviously, it's the Pac-12 season opener, a rival in Stanford, a team they didn't get to face last year. So this one will be interesting. I believe it's the 101st meeting between these two programs. And, Stanford did not look that great against Kansas State, coming off a less than ideal performance. So USC is opening as an 18-point favorite, but I don't think you can consider this is going to be a blowout game. I know a lot of fans are expecting that, considering how Stanford looked. But, the Stanford game is always weird. It feels like it could be a 3-point win or maybe a 30-point win. I have no idea what to expect, but I don't think they can take the Cardinal lightly, even though they did not have a good season opener. If they stay focused, it could be a chance to put up some more points against this defense and maybe look a little bit cleaner than they did against San Jose State.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, that's going to wrap it up for USC's Tuesday practice of Stanford Week. For Chris Treviño, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.